Yeah, most people try to like not bring it up because it's a sad subject to bring up upon, but everybody knows what happened and everybody mourns and everybody's upset about what happened.
You can't really forget something that big and traumatic.
Or it could mean it's not Bryan because his car's got nothing in it and there were only 13 minutes to do this. The magistrate didn't get to know that.
In fact, his DNA is still on the knife sheath, though.
There's more than enough evidence for people to make a decision, and how can the truth contaminate anything?
We are counting down to Bryan Kohberger's plea hearing today. He's expected to expect an offer in connection to the murders of those 4 University of Idaho students. But this morning, we're also wondering if he does plead guilty as expected, will he speak? And will we ever know why he allegedly committed the murders? Plus, a New Mexico man is facing murder charges for allegedly convincing his sword-wielding girlfriend to kill another woman. We take a closer look at what he told police during his interrogation. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Wednesday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? It's that time here on Court TV where we get you all warmed up and ready to go for the big Court TV live day ahead. And oh, what a big day it's going to be. So right now, let's do it as we always do. Grab that cup of coffee or tea, whatever you're having this morning. It's time for my opening statement. What an offensive waste of time. 2 years and 8 months of torture for the families of Kaylee Gonsalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. Grieving the loss of their loved ones and anticipating the trial of the man accused of killing them. Going through the countless hearings about his defense. Planning their lives around the August 2025 trial that would hopefully bring them justice. And then, the month before the trial is set to begin, they learned he wants to plead guilty. I've been thinking about this, my friends, and that must have been so stunning to these families, both emotionally and mentally, since this creep seemed so intent on fighting the allegations. For those families, I think his waiting game was cruel. They could have been spared so much heartache. And as for the star-gazing creep, Bryan Kohberger, I said his alibi story about stargazing that night of the homicides was hogwash when I first heard it. And today we will all get the official confirmation on that if he pleads guilty as he's expected to. And if Bryan Kohberger did in fact murder those 4 beautiful University of Idaho students, he deserves to be buried under the prison rather than having a cell inside of it. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
Guilty or not guilty?
I think guilty of some, but not all.
I would think he would be found guilty, but, you know, stranger things have happened.
Based on what the prosecution gave me, I don't think that it's enough to give somebody 30 years, 20 years.
In New York, we've got jury deliberations continuing in Diddy's federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The jury is expected to return to the courthouse at 9 a.m. Eastern time. In Florida, we have got Courtney Clenny due in court as her defense team is trying to disqualify the state attorney's office from prosecuting the case. Now, Clenny is accused in the stabbing death of her boyfriend, Christian Albomselli, back in 2022. This morning's hearing is going to kick off at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. And in Idaho, we've got defendant Bryan Kohberger due in court, as I was just talking about in my opening statement, for his change of plea hearing. That is expected to take place at 1 p.m. Eastern time, and that is, of course, our top story for you here on Opening Statements. Now, this is happening in Boise, Idaho. If he pleads guilty as expected, sentencing would likely be within the coming weeks. The judge has the ability to reject the plea agreement. Now, remember that. The judge has to approve it. Prosecutors and defendants can agree on it, but the court has to approve of it. Now, this is something that Steve Gonsalves, Kaylee Gonsalves' father, talked about on News Nation. In fact, he proposed it as he is criticizing this resolution. Take a listen.
100%. The fault is in leadership and the people that you place this evidence upon. They were weak. They decided to play God and decide what this man's decision should be, and not a jury, not his peers. They, so that's where we are today.
Now, Ben Mogen, Maddie Mogen's dad, had this reaction to the Kohberger plea offer, saying, quote, "We can actually put this behind us and not have these future dates and future things that we don't want to have to be at and that we shouldn't have to be at that have to do with this terrible person. We get to just think about the rest of our lives and have to try and figure out how to do it without Maddie and the rest of the kids," end quote. Now, Kohberger's plea offer has been a very hot-button topic this week, as you know, in the true crime community. I have two outstanding attorneys I want to bring on now to talk about it with me. Criminal defense and civil rights attorney Kesia Early and criminal defense attorney, as well as former prosecuting attorney Franz Borghardt. Good morning to you both. So let's talk about this proposed resolution. I would love to start with just your general thoughts on what the state of Idaho is doing here. Ladies first, please. Kesia.
Yes, good morning, Julie. And your opening statement, absolutely hands-on. I agreed. It's unfortunate that he already knew that the evidence was overwhelming, right? And I really don't believe that anyone was really surprised that he's admitting to guilt, because from the very beginning, the arraignment, he put up a fight. He didn't even enter a plea of not guilty. The defense attorney had to do that on his behalf. So we was really gearing up for a fight, unfortunately, and to take the family through this. But for him to really pretty much wave the white flag, I really believe that he thought that he could get away with the perfect murder. I mean, he had everything. He was the PhD student studying criminology, and I really believe that he kind of studied it to the point where it became obsessive, and he thought, you know what, I can do this, which shows his whereabouts prior to the murder. So I don't believe that he's going to give a statement. I don't believe that he's going to apologize. I believe that he's going to remain silent, just as he did in the beginning. He's a cold-blooded killer, has no remorse. And I'm so glad that the family can finally put this behind them. And I just want to give special recognition to the police department in Moscow. They were a small town, a small precinct, but they had a big heart to solve this case so that the family can have some form of healing going forward.
Beautifully said. Kesia, thank you for all of that. Franz, to you next, please. Your thoughts on this proposed resolution?
Well, number one, he needs to be thanking his defense team for getting him a life plea. This was, look, the guilt phase of this was generally agreed upon as a foregone conclusion. Whether or not they were going to hit the death penalty in the penalty phase, Julie, that is always the giant question mark. But in such an overwhelming case, to get a life offer is a tremendous win by the defense. So he needs to be thanking his lucky stars for that bone, for that life raft, so to speak. Now, that said, what we're seeing is the nature of the system, which is some victims are on board with this and some are not. And you know what? They're both right. They're both right to feel the way they feel. Some are like, thank goodness we're saving this time. We don't have to go through a trial. And others are saying this is a miscarriage of justice. They're both right. And at the end of the day, the good thing about this plea is we have a conviction, a plea. It's probably non-appealable. He is going to go to jail for multiple life sentences. There can be whatever form of closure there can be. We get that. And that is a good thing. That is a good thing. Should he be put to death? Well, once he pleads, that's no longer really part of the conversation.
Yes, and Franz, I love what you said about these families both being right. So well said. Thank you for that. And I'm glad you brought up the issue of appeal, because we can report that as part of this proposed agreement, as we understand it, we'll see it all play out today, of course, but we understand that he is waiving any rights to take an appeal as part of this. So for the death penalty being taken off the table, that's what he's giving up in exchange. So it would be finally put to bed. That being said, there's the question of whether the judge would impose sentence today or order a pre-sentence investigation to be done and they set it down the road. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. Kesia, what do you think?
Yes, Julie, typically with a pre-sentence investigation and typically called a PSI, that's if you're looking at a few years or years. This is a life sentence. So the recommendation, there's really no wiggle room for that. The PSI usually gives the recommendation of the officer who did a complete evaluation, and maybe there's some mitigation that was submitted. So I do not believe that there will be a PSI ordered, and I do believe he will be sentenced after accepting the plea. I mean, why delay it? Why give another court date? Why waste judicial resources when we have everything? This is a detailed plea resolution, I believe, that went up various chambers. I mean, even though you don't have all of the victim's consent, this was the best possible resolution. So I don't believe that there will be any other delays. Go ahead and accept his plea and sentence him accordingly.
All right, Casey, thank you for that. Let me just throw another, possible issue into the mix here. The victims who may want to deliver impact statements may not be prepared because this did happen so quickly. We heard the Gonsalveses saying this was unexpected on their Facebook page. So I'm wondering if they indicate to the state that they need a little more time, if we may see it pushed down the road. Franz, your thoughts on that?
I was just about to say the only reason to delay it is because of the victim's impact statements. He's incarcerated. He's not going anywhere. If not all the victims are ready to be present and to make a statement, there's no, while I agree, it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to get life, they may delay, and the parties may agree to that. They may delay just so that everybody can be present, everybody can have their voice. And look, people sometimes underestimate the power of a victim's impact statement. This is the one time the victim gets to stand up and actually talk to the convicted individual, because otherwise the victim has to show up and be quiet. They can't say anything in open court. They can't say anything. I think that would be the only reason for a delay. Otherwise, he could get sentenced today.
Sure. So I suppose we'll just see. We've been trying to find out, but we haven't been given any firm confirmation either way. So as best we can tell, it could happen today, or it could come a few weeks out, as we noted earlier. Franz and Casey, I'm so happy we have you both for the whole hour. Thank you for being with us. Stand by, please. We're going to hit a break. Friends at home, go refill your coffee. Here's what's coming up on opening statements. We're going to continue talking about this plea hearing today, this change of plea hearing for Bryan Kohberger. And we're wondering, is he ever going to confirm why he committed the murders? If he did, in fact, commit them? That's next. Plus, jurors returning to court this morning in New York City. They indicated on Tuesday that they've reached a partial verdict in Diddy's trial, but they're stuck on the racketeering count. We're going to be talking about the very eventful day with someone outside the courthouse. Coming up.
This week,
a high school party turns deadly. Now a former student is facing a jury. We're breaking down each day's proceedings in the Preppy Party murder trial.
Opening statements with Julie Grant. Mornings at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
Couldn't keep my life straight.
They were killed by their own children.
That challenged the legal system and ourselves. Court TV, Legendary Trials.
Based on details at the scene, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims.
He's very quiet, calculated about what he says.
I want to see an innocent man, but I feel like he's just scared to look at me in the eyes.
If you plead guilty or found guilty, it is up to death and or imprisonment for life. Do you understand?
Yes.
We're expecting to see Bryan Kohberger in court today to change his plea from not guilty to guilty. And a question remains as to whether we'll hear from him ever, perhaps at the time that he is sentenced. But if he does choose to speak, will that mean he'll answer the unanswered questions we've all been asking in this homicide case? Let's take a look back together at the first time that we expected to hear something from Kohberger. It was when he was arraigned in a Moscow, Idaho courtroom in 2023. He heard the charges read to him by the judge. He said he understood them, along with the possible penalties. When it was time for him to enter a plea, his attorney was the one to do it. He stood silent. Let's look back.
Your Honor, we will be standing silent.
Okay, because Mr. Kohberger is standing silent, I'm going to enter not guilty pleas on each charge. Counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
We'll see if he's silent today in the courtroom. The bigger question we're asking, will the families ever get the answers as to why this happened, if he is the person who did those murders? I have two outstanding guests to talk about this with me. I want to bring them in now. Criminology expert, author, and professor, Dr. Debbie Goodman, and double board certified psychiatrist, Dr. Dom Sportelli. Good morning to you both. Do we think we will ever hear from Bryan Kohberger explaining this, if he did this? So for the sake of our analysis, let's just assume this is going to go forward as it's been indicated by the attorneys. Dr. Dom, would you start us off, please? Do you think someone like this will ever give us the why?
Good morning, Julie. Thank you. So when you look at a personality structure like Kohberger, there are a few things that stand out to me. One thing is that he posted quite a bit on social media in 2012. And in 2012, he made statements that almost seemed to be a cry for help and almost explaining that he was a misunderstood individual. For example, he said that he was suffering from depression, anxiety, something called depersonalization, where it felt like he was living his life in a video game. Paraphrasing, of course, he stated things such as, when I look my family in the eyes, I feel nothing, as if I'm in a video game. Why would someone write this? Why would someone put this out into the public? It's a sense of wanting to be heard. So in that case, that makes me think that there's a possibility that he might want some sort of need to connect, to seek validation in his own way, to perhaps gain empathy from others. And then there's the other part, Julie, that sometimes individuals that, and again, with Mr. Kohberger, we don't know specifically, but obviously dealing in a case like this, he's showing lack of empathy, potential narcissism, self-centeredness. That's why they engage in these acts. But I feel as though he might want to manipulate public perception to be portrayed as maybe misunderstood, or even, as crazy as it sounds, justify his actions.
Wow, this is fascinating, Dr. Dom. Fascinating insight about the psychology. And let's turn now to the criminology. After hearing what Dr. Dom said, Dr. Debbie, curious what you think is, as you've been following this case so closely and the behavior that's been exhibited. And let's remind ourselves, this guy was a criminology student. He wanted to be like you, Dr. Debbie. He wanted to be a professor someday. What does that all say to you about the behavior?
Good morning, Julie. I think one day we will hear the why, because if we look back at some other high-profile killers, Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, at their time and place, they have revealed the why. And you and I have had discussions, of course, my theory about jar, jealousy, anger, revenge. I think at some level he will reveal that to us. I do believe this individual is an incel, involuntary celibate. I think he's a psychopath, and the jealousy, anger, revenge came about when he really took a look at his own life, personally and professionally. At the time, up to 28 years, I think he was jealous of our victims individually and collectively. He was angry that he didn't have a platonic friend, male or female, let alone any type of intimacy, and ultimately took the revenge, Julie, with these just savage slaughters and brutal murders of our innocent victims. But yes, I do believe that he will reveal at his control, when he wants to, why he did what he did.
Dr. Debbie, I've told you before, I'll tell you again, that acronym JAR that you've given us time and time again on this case, it's brilliant. I keep saying you need to write a book on this. I'll give you the title, A Jarring Case I'll write the foreword for you, my friend. Dr. Dom, I would love to bounce this off of you. What Dr. Debbie just shared, the jealousy, anger, rage, revenge, this case. When you hear these things, what does that say to you, practicing psychiatry? What does that say to you about his mental state, what may have been going on with him at the time of these homicides?
Yeah, so Julie, you know, when we think of responses of anger and rage and even jealousy, in psychiatry and psychology, that's a feeling of vulnerability. It's a feeling of weakness. It's a feeling of a perceived threat in some way, shape, or form. So in his mind, somehow, somewhere, he probably felt vulnerable and a perceived threat from outsiders and angry. Now, what I find interesting is a lot of his social media posts, as we were talking about before, as he was almost justifying being angry about the way that his life was. Specifically, he experienced this visual snow syndrome, right? Which is a visual disturbance of seeing, you know, fuzzy things in your visual space. The depersonalization and this feeling as if he was living in a video game. It seems as though he was very angry about how he's been dealt those cards and how he has this life that he has to deal with now and feeling misunderstood. So that perhaps leads to that feeling of vulnerability and lashing out and anger towards others.
Wait, this is fascinating, Dr. Dom and Dr. Debbie. Thinking about the victims here, if we could turn to their perspective and how unsatisfying this feels for some of them. We know that the Gonsalveses are just furious with this resolution. They wanted to see it go to trial. They hoped for the death penalty. We know Steve Gonsalves has been largely the one speaking out the most in the media. They put on the family Facebook page that we are beyond furious at the state of Idaho. They say the state of Idaho has failed them. They asked for time. They said this was very, very unexpected. If they never get the why from Bryan Kohberger after today, Dr. Debbie, what would you say to these family members?
I would say, Julie, keep hope at the center of a lot of their personal and professional thoughts and feelings moving forward. I like to look at the acronym HOPE, hold on, pain ends. And we can just imagine, and unfortunately so, the pain, the suffering, the trauma of not only losing their loved ones, Julie, but this whole 2.5 year, you know, up and down, just emotional tugging at the heartstrings of hoping that everything is proceeding in the manner in which they would want. So although there may be at the moment a sense of discord or disharmony with this decision, hopefully at some point in their lives and livelihood, they will recognize that a conviction is very important and this individual will never leave a prison environment for the entirety of his lifetime and theirs.
Dr. Debbie, thank you for that. Dr. Dom, same question to you, please. What advice may you have for the families?
Yeah, understood, Julie. You know, I think that with a full trial, with an understanding of why perhaps there tends to be this feeling in a grieving family of justice and closure and accountability, right? And I think we have to remember that this gentleman is behind bars. He's been captured. He's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. And a little bit of comfort in that knowledge, even though that is certainly not going to answer why. And the truth of the matter is, we will never be inside his head. We will never fully understand who he is and why he did what he did. So that answer to why is something in 99.9% of cases of violent crime, we don't truly know or will never know. The grief takes time. And the other thing is sometimes families feel that going through a trial or having explanations gives the case more public attention so the victims' stories can be heard, and that can help them process the grief. But I want the families to know that the victims' stories can still be heard. And let's make this about the victims and their lives and how wonderful individuals they were, instead of making it about this horrible person that committed these acts.
Oh, I love that. Dr. Dumb, that's what we love to do on this show, make it about the victims. Brilliant analysis from brilliant people. Dr. Dom Sportelli, Dr. Debbie Goodman, thank you both so much for sharing your insight and expertise with us here on Opening Statements. Hope to see you both soon. Still ahead here on the show, jury deliberations are getting back underway in less than an hour from now in the case of music superstar Sean Diddy Combs. When we return, we're going to spotlight all the twists and turns coming from the jury, their questions, their comments. It was a busy day, too. We'll take you to the courthouse next. Plus, a New Mexico man allegedly convinced his girlfriend to kill another woman with a sword. In our next hour, we're taking a look at what he said to police when he was interrogated.
We were all hanging out. Everybody was talking, happy, normal kind of thing, nonchalant. Nighttime came around and we started falling asleep. Kali did not fall asleep. I did not get good rest because she had been placing something sharp in my back.
Welcome back. In less than an hour from now, the jury will be inside the federal courthouse in Manhattan, continuing their deliberations in Sean Combs' federal sex trafficking and racketeering trial. They appear to be close to getting a verdict on all the charges. They told the judge they've reached a verdict on 4 of them. There are 5 charges in total. They said they're having trouble on the racketeering charge. That is count 1. Let's take a look at what the juries have to consider with respect to that. Was Combs the head of a criminal organization? Did the people in that organization commit what are called predicate acts or racketeering activities? In other words, bad crimes. Think of all the bad crimes you can come up with. And here are the ones on your screen here that they're alleging in this case occurred. The federal government alleging all these things happened: kidnapping, arson, bribery, witness tampering, forced labor, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution, and possession and or distribution of narcotics. Were these things done at Diddy's direction by his soldiers or associates, so to speak? His defense team says no. The federal government says yes. What is this jury thinking? It's been really hard to tell based on their questions. I have 2 outstanding guests I want to bring in now. One of them is there at the courthouse. He is the editor-in-chief of the Hip Hop Enquirer magazine, Dennis Byron. He's been covering this trial start to finish in the courtroom every day. Dennis, good morning to you. And our legal eagle, a 2-time former United States attorney, represented the Northern District of West Virginia. He's also been a state-level prosecutor as well. He's a heavy hitter in the private sector now, attorney William Ehlenfeld. Good morning, William. All right, Dennis, I want to begin with you, please, because you've been looking at these jurors and then reading their questions. Read the tea leaves for us, if you will. What do you think is going on, please?
Well, we do know that there's at least 4 verdicts that have been reached in the case against Sean Combs. My guess, based on the count 1 that hasn't been reached, is that they're on the fence about. I'm sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. We have a little problem out here. The family just arrived.
Yeah, if you need a minute, we can come back to you in a second.
Okay, yes,
I don't want anybody bothering you. I know it's hectic from having been there. And Dennis, you were so good to me when I was there. I enjoyed coming in the courthouse. Yeah, you get accosted on the street there. So.
Well, I'm not.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to see what I see right now.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you, my friend. Keep your camera on you. And I'm going to go to William here to read the tea leaves. So, William, counts 2 through 5, a verdict. Count 1, no verdict. What do you think that means?
Well, as we've talked before, Julie, RICO is complicated. There's more than just the predicate acts. And I don't think the jury's hung up on whether or not Diddy engaged in these predicate acts, to include transportation for prostitution, drug distribution. Some of these predicate acts were proven beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no doubt at all that they occurred. I think it's more that they're hung up on whether or not there was an enterprise and whether or not these employees of Diddy and his enterprise really knew what they were doing, whether there was an agreement or not. I think the government put enough there for the jury to make that finding, but I think that's what the jury is hung up on right now. But we've got these other 4 verdicts, and I think that in all likelihood there's a conviction on the sex trafficking as it relates to Cassie, and I think in all likelihood there are convictions on the transportation to engage in prostitution. They might be hung up on the sex trafficking count as it relates to Jane, because I don't believe that was as strong, and there were more text messages that could throw some doubt into there when it comes to Jane and the sex trafficking count with her.
Sure. Well said, William. Dennis, if you're good to go, I want to kind of pick back up where we left off. So what do you think might be going on with these verdicts? Do you think they're guilty verdicts, not guilty, a mix, as William just indicated?
I would agree with William that there probably is a guilty on Cassie, 2 counts and 2 counts not guilty. I don't believe that they will come to a resolution on their count 1. Because, we heard the evidence. It doesn't appear that any of the employees knew what Mr. Combs was engaged in. And I think that's what the jurors are wrestling with right now.
That's an important point, Dennis. Let me circle back to that. So what the jury heard, you were in there listening every single day and watching them. Were these employees just acting on directions, not really in the loop, so to speak, kind of unwittingly acting? Was that the impression you got?
That's clearly the impression. We did hear testimony from one witness who stated that Mr. Combs went to great length not to let his employees know what was happening with these freak-offs. And the other part is we saw the video. We saw the video of Cassie getting beat in the hotel. And I think that the jurors are making them pay for that at this point. I think they're going to make them pay for that.
Yeah, the video, horrific, as we all know. Dennis, great insight. William, legally, let's say the jury is still stuck on count 1 today, and let's say they go back to the judge and say, Judge, there's no way we have a resolution on this. What do you think the court should do then?
So, the judge has the option to provide additional guidance and an additional instruction to the jury to encourage them to continue to deliberate. This was a long trial. This was 6 weeks or so, and that's what the government asked for yesterday, an Allen charge, which would encourage the jury to get back into that room and come up with a verdict so we don't have a hung jury on that count. It sounds like they're really dug in based upon the note that was delivered to the court yesterday. And so I think the court might try to do that, try to give the jury some more encouragement. He can't go too far with that. He's got to be very careful not to put undue pressure on the jury to come up with a verdict. And I think ultimately, just reading the tea leaves here, this jury is not going to come up with a verdict on count 1. They're going to be hung on that. And I think we'll end up with a partial verdict with convictions on 4 of the counts and a hung jury on the 5th count.
And William, correct me if I'm wrong, but a 15-year mandatory minimum on the sex trafficking count if he's convicted of that.
That's right. And so I think if the government gets a conviction on 1 or both of the sex trafficking counts, that'll be it. Even if there's a hung jury on the RICO count, they're not going to come back and retry that. It takes way too many resources to go back and try that 1 count when they've got 15 years. The judge could run those consecutive. I doubt that he would. But, Sean Combs is not a young man. He's, I believe, 55 years old. And so if he were to get a 15-year sentence, or at least 15 years, it could be a little bit more than that. He'll be in there for a long time, and I think the government would be satisfied with that. And that would be the end of this story, at least as far as the trial court goes. Of course, they've got outstanding appellate lawyers on their team as well, so they're going to appeal some things. But I think ultimately, if they get a 15-year count, they're going to be satisfied with that and close the books on the Diddy case.
William, a really helpful insight from you. Thank you kindly for that. Dennis, let me ask you, please, when the question and I guess I should say the information came from the jury about we've reached a verdict on counts 2 through 5, I'm presuming you were in the courtroom watching things. Tell us, please, what you observed with respect to Sean Combs. How did he look to you hearing that news?
Very surprised. Very surprised. I think that was the mood of him and the family that was in the courtroom because he now has some clarity as to what his fate will likely be in this case. Knowing that there was a no decision on count 1, you can deduct that from the no decision on count 1 that he was convicted of something. He just don't know what that something is.
Sure. Dennis Byron, you've been doing such great reporting and photography out there. You're also a photographer in addition to being the editor-in-chief of the Hip Hop Inquirer. Thank you for all the information. I look forward to talking again soon. Attorney William Ehlenfeld, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to come on the program as well. We'll see you both soon. Still to come here on Opening Statements, we're talking about defendant Raul Valle, this guy back on the witness stand in the Preppy Party murder trial. Will he tip the scales of justice?
I trusted my best friend that everything was going to be okay and we were just going to go and make peace.
Did you still have the knife on you?
Yes.
Was it open?
No.
Where was it?
Still in my pocket.
Still in your right pocket?
Yes.
How were you feeling at this point?
Nervous.
Why were you feeling nervous?
Because there was a lot of people just surrounding me.
We want to understand the mindset behind your actions in this case.
I'm going to give you a news scoop.
What happened?
I did it.
Very funny, really. I'm laughing. You see me, I laugh.
I don't want any of this. You think you should get some kind of credit for not killing people?
Not at all, no.
You are a shrewd operator.
Interview with a Killer. Marathon starting Friday, 11:10 Central. Only on Court TV.
We expect the closing arguments to happen tomorrow in the Preppy Party murder trial. Defendant Raul Valle taking the stand, testifying in his own defense for 2 days. He faced some rigorous cross-examination Tuesday by the state, targeting Valle's own choices, like getting back in a car with a knife.
You could have stayed at the corner of Farmhouse Road and Laurel Glen and waited for Mackenzie's sister to pick you up, right?
Looking back, that's what we should have done.
Move to strike is non-responsive. You could have stayed at the corner of Laurel Glen and Farmhouse Road, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't do that, did you?
No.
And you got back in that car with the knife?
Yes.
And you indicated on direct examination you were scared to get back in the car, right?
Yes.
But you did it anyway.
Yes.
And you didn't have to go back to that house, did you?
Valle is accused of stabbing 4 people during a high school brawl, killing one of them. A young man who goes by the name Jimmy McGrath. James McGrath, 17 years old, star lacrosse player, was killed. He would be the 4th student in that line of children there in this incident. Now, Valle turned down 2 plea offers. During the cross-examination, he got emotional at some points on direct and then on cross. Some would say he held his own when it came time for the cross. So let's talk about all of it. Will his emotions help tip the scales here? Will the cross tip the scales for the state? Let's bring in our guest, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Franz Borghardt is with me. Franz, you watched this yesterday. Let's just start with the direct. Let's start there and then we'll progress to the cross. So how did you think this young man came off when he was being asked questions by his own lawyer?
I think on direct he came across great. But the problem is any great direct examination can get destroyed by a superb cross-examination, and that, Julie, is what we saw yesterday. We saw a good cross-examination of this young man, and I don't know if it was a wash for him or not. I'll say this. He doesn't come across as a liar. I do think he comes across as someone who doesn't remember things as they actually happen, and I know that sounds a lot like possibly a liar, but I don't think that that's how he's coming across. I think he's coming across as a young person who made a bad decision, who has lost his temper on the stand a little bit and gets a little heated. But that's what young kids do. I mean, and that's the problem with this prosecution is I don't know that self-defense works, but on the other hand, he has to, under the law, be tried as an adult. And so what are we left with? We're left with an adult standard for someone who probably may not be fully developed and may not be fully cooked, so to speak. And I think he's going to get convicted.
Franz, sharp analysis, as always, from you. Thank you for that. Let's play a clip. This is from the direct examination. This is one of those points we saw where he got very emotional.
As you began to try to back up, what happened at that point?
I got hit.
Where did you get hit?
It was the side of my head, I want to say, but I couldn't really tell where.
How were you feeling at that point?
Everything just went black.
Did you have the knife in your hand at that point?
No.
Where was the knife?
It was in my pocket.
Could you get up?
No.
Why not?
There was just so many people.
Okay, Franz, just looking at that clip, you know, where we did see the tears streaming down his face, the crying, what impact, if any, do you think that moment might have had on the jurors?
I again think he's sincere. I don't think those were crocodile tears, Julie. But the problem is, and it's all, what jury did both sides pick? Did they pick a jury where one or two jurors are like, you know what, I don't want to hold this young man to this adult standard when we know he's a juvenile? Or do we have a jury that views things the other way? I think they're going to be sympathetic. Now, what I will say is if he gets convicted of a lesser charge, I think his sincerity on the stand will have more of an impact on the judge who will be ultimately the one sentencing him.
A great point. Franz, tell me, the cross, do you think it was damaging enough that it might have undone some of those really powerful moments that he had on direct?
I think the cross-examination showed that he had other options and that he did not have to act in self-defense. I think that the saving grace for him was always he brought a knife to a fist fight, but there was some arguments for why that was necessary or maybe appropriate. The problem is and look, this is why oftentimes we tell our clients not to testify, is a good skilled attorney can unravel a lot on cross-examination. And I think that essentially what that prosecutor did, Julie, was that they showed that, no, you didn't have to do this. And there were other options and that the force may have been unreasonable. And if that is what the jury believes, then self-defense goes out the window. Now, that all being said, I think this is a case he had to testify in. I think they needed to hear from him. And that is the double-edged sword, no pun intended, the double-edged sword of these cases is on a self-defense case, you have to generally get on the stand. You have to tell your story. But you also have to face a very skilled attorney who's been trained on how to examine you. And generally, in that battle, the attorney wins.
Well said, Franz. So tell me, looking at this case, I know that this is the quest for justice in criminal court, but with such a messy case like this, I would have to imagine that things are going to continue in civil court. Franz, do you think that we're going to see lawsuits filed and this awful saga continuing long after the disposition of this one?
I think there will be civil suits. I think what people need to understand is it will be civil suits against everybody and against homeowners insurance policies. I mean, this young man won't be left holding the financial tab. It will be some insurance company that may or may not be culpable and responsible for that. That said, he hasn't been convicted yet. And if he is acquitted, you'll still see the flurry of civil suits. But then again, does he have a civil suit if he gets acquitted? That could be the multi-million-dollar question. So, you know, I don't know. This is a messy case. Part of me just thinks he really should have possibly, in his own best interest, taken a resolution. But ultimately, this is how our justice system works. He gets to make that decision, and he has a right to go to trial.
Beautifully said, Franz. Yeah, I would love to know the terms of those two resolutions that were offered to him. We don't know yet, but maybe after the trial is over, someone will tell us. Franz Borghardt, we love having you on this program. Thank you for all of the great insight. We'll see you soon. That is all for this episode of Opening Statements. Friends at home, you can watch it again. You can share it.